Hey guys, so today I wanted to film a wrap-up video for what I read in February, and I have a lot to talk about because I read a lot of short books, and I've read some graphic novels, I read some short stories, read some novels, adult, YA, and middle grade, and one nonfiction. Okay, so let's just jump into it. There's a lot to talk about. A lot of the books that I read, I don't have because I read a lot of library books. So I will insert a picture of the book cover here in the corner. I will figure out how to do that. I can figure out how to do that. Okay, so it's just like overall stats for the month of February. I read 2 contemporary, 4 fantasy, 1 nonfiction, and 10 graphic novels. I had a pretty good reading month as far as star ratings go because I gave 1 book 3 stars, 2 books 4 stars, 10 books 4.5 stars, and 5 stars, 4 books 5 stars. So I read a total of 17 books and 4,937 pages this month. 3 ebooks and 14 physical books. 11 adult, 3 middle grade, and 3 YA. So let's just start. We'll go in chronological order. So the first book I read in February was Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. This is about a girl named Karu who lives in Prague, so super cool setting, and her family figures are not human. She meets an angel. Basically, her family lives in a different realm that she can access through these doors, only by being let in from the inside. She doesn't know where she came from. She doesn't know who her parents are. I love Laini Taylor's writing style. I'm sure probably most of you heard that she's very lyrical. She's very like poetic, very fancy descriptions and metaphors. I love it. I read through this really fast because I was just really intrigued with the plot line. So I believe I gave this one 4 stars. The second one I read was Night by Elie Wiesel, which is a non-fiction book, 1950 from 1958. I gave it a 5 stars. It's part of a trilogy. The story is split up into 3 novels about all this length, if I understand correctly. And it is about the author's experiences as a teenager in Auschwitz and Birkenau with his father. So, I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It was perfect. I wouldn't change anything about the way the story was put in the book. I'm not going to give a rating to someone's personal experiences, but the writing was great. The translation was great. I believe it's translated by his wife, and the size, I thought the size was perfect. So yeah, 5 out of 5 stars. And the third book I read was Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This is a contemporary YA published in 2017. The entire book takes place while the main character is going down the elevator in his apartment building, and it's the very beginning of the book you learn that the protagonists, I forget his name, his brother's been shot and killed, and he is struggling with himself to follow the rules that he's been taught as a young man, like the rules of the streets, protecting your family, revenge for your family, that kind of thing. So I thought it was really good. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. At some points, I wasn't a huge fan of the writing. At some points I did get a little bit bored, which usually doesn't happen to me with things written in verse. There we go, written in verse. But I thought overall the plot and the idea was really good. I think it won a couple prizes. And then after that, I started the first graphic novel of the month, and I read Lock and Key Volume 1, Welcome to Lovecraft, and I also picked up Volume 2 in the same series. So this is a graphic novel series by Joe Hill, and I forget the artist's name, but I'll put pictures of the 2 volumes up here. And it's about a family living in this cool old mansion in Massachusetts, I believe, Lovecraft, Massachusetts. And it's super unique premise. It has to do with locks and keys and these magical locks. I don't want to tell you too much because I think it's better if you go into it not knowing a lot and then it unfolds in front of you. So I'm just gonna say that I loved the art style. Absolutely loved the art style. I read these as ebooks from Hoopla, and I loved the writing and the story of these graphic novels. I thought it was super unique. I was addicted immediately. When I feel like picking up more graphic novels, I'll definitely continue with the series. I would recommend it. I would highly recommend it. I love Joe Hill. And then I read The Last Olympian by Rick Riordan, which is the last book in the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series. And I thought it was a great ending to the series. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was a perfect wrap-up. I love the series and the characters, and I give it a full 5 out of 5 stars because of that. The Percy Jackson series is about a teenage boy who finds out he's a demigod and goes to a camp in New York that is designed to protect other children of the gods that mixed with humans like him. And he makes friends, he goes on quests. He's a little bit controversial because of who his parent is, but I'm not gonna tell you. But yeah, I thought it was a really good middle grade series, and I give it a 5 stars because it was a good wrap up to the end of the series, and I highly recommend the Percy Jackson series. I've said this before, but I definitely like the Percy Jackson books more than I like the Harry Potter books. I definitely had a better reading experience with them, so yeah. Then I finished out the Saga graphic novel series, which is like 6 of the books I read this month. So I read volumes 3 through 9 by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples, about a family on the run, set in space or on different planets. They're on the run because their family is not supposed to exist, and it's basically like a family saga. I really liked it. Everyone told me that I was not going to be prepared for volume 9 because my heart was going to shatter, and I was a little disappointed because maybe I'm just an asshole, but my heart didn't break that much. I was more just like wanted to pick up the next one and didn't want to leave it where it was. But I've heard that the author and the illustrator are taking a break for a while, but I recommend it if you like stories that follow families. I really loved the characters and the creativity of the author and the illustrator, creating all these different worlds and different characters. Go into it knowing that it's super weird, and there's super weird characters. There's at least one full illustration in each book that's going to make you super uncomfortable. Do not read it. Not safe for work, not safe for public transportation, unless you're like me and you can read graphic novels on like a Kindle or an iPad or something. So just be warned. If there are people looking over your shoulder, probably don't read these. The art style is awesome. The characters are awesome. I would have liked to be able to get to know the characters a little bit more so that that final volume was more impactful on me, but that's okay. Sometimes I don't get as much out of graphic novels as other people, but it's fine. I'm not going to blame the authors or the book for that. I'm kind of going to take that on as my responsibility, my fault. So I ended up giving all the volumes 4.5 stars. And then the last one I gave 4 stars, just because I was a little bit disappointed that I wasn't that. I thought that that volume seemed kind of rushed. There's a lot of like attempts for tension, a lot of attempts to, I don't know, make us nervous, and it worked. It's just the end. I was like, all right, let's see. Oh, then, okay, the whole month, mid-February, I picked up A Storm of Swords, book 3 of A Song of Ice and Fire, or the Game of Thrones series. So I read about 300 pages of this last winter, so winter a year ago, and I left off about here. And then halfway through February, I finished this off, and I read the rest of the book within like maybe 2 weeks, if 2 weeks, maybe 12 days. And I ended up giving it 4 stars. This isn't my favorite book so far in the series. This is the longest one, I believe, at 1,128 pages. And sometimes I felt like it dragged. In the middle, it dragged a little bit. It picked up shortly after that, but this is kind of like it definitely has middle book syndrome. You're kind of like in the middle of it, nothing crazy is happening, you kind of just have to watch the characters do their thing for a while. There's not as many like plot twists or gasp moments in this one as there were in the first 2. The first 2 I just couldn't put down as soon as I picked them up, because there were so many of the moments. The first one is probably still my favorite, because it was the first one that I had like the best experience with. Like, I picked it up, it took me the whole prologue to get used to George R.R. Martin's writing style and the language. After that prologue, I was having so much fun. It was my first experience with epic fantasy. I hadn't watched any of the HBO series yet, so if this was a series I knew nothing about, and I wanted to at least pick up the first book and finish it before I watched anything on HBO. So I went into it knowing almost nothing, and loved it. It was so fun. It was something I'd never tackled before. There were so many points where I was like, you know? So the first book is definitely still holds a spot in my heart I'm sentimental toward it, so I feel like it's always going to be my favorite out of the series, unless in the next 2 books something happens. In A Storm of Swords, of course, at the end of the book, something happened that I would say is fairly important, and that I would say has implications in the rest of the books, happened that does not happen in any season of the HBO series at all. So that was super interesting. I'm wondering if we'll see that in the final series of HBO that starts in April. I don't know. There's always been a couple things that are different in the books than in the series. And you get so much more detail and so much more characterization in the books than in the HBO series. Past like season 2 in the HBO series, I feel like it's been watered down a little bit more, like TV friendly, because the books are not TV friendly. there's a lot of violence, a lot of sexual misconduct, or just sexual conduct. There's a lot of blood and gore and language, and that's something I love about it. Whereas, and the style that they speak in kind of goes away after season 2, or gets a lot more diluted after season 2, where the books that never leaves. So I prefer the books to the show, definitely, and I'm interested to see how different the books get from the show. Then I picked up a manga. Picked up volume 4 of Full Metal Alchemist by Hiromu Arakawa, and I gave it 3 stars because I didn't feel any type of way about it. For volume 4, I was just... The reason I didn't like volume 4 is the reason I don't like most manga series. So let me just dive into that real quick, and hopefully not too many people want to murder me. I usually get about 3 volumes into a manga series and I'm bored out of my mind because the story is the same thing over and over. I have tried Death Note. I got to like volume 5 or 6 and I was bored because it was the same shit over and over. Same storyline redone each volume. And I feel like that's the way it was in volume 4. Like, I love the characters and I love them in 1 through 3. It's just depends on how much patience I have to see them do the same thing and have the same problems and the same fights. So I loved 1 through 3. If I could change one thing to make it a 5-star, I would just give it more diversity in the plot. And maybe I'm quitting too soon. Maybe it does happen later down the line. But I'm not going to continue because I didn't have a good reading experience. I have so many other things on my TBR that I want to read. And I'm not wasting any time in 2019 forcing myself to finish books because I don't care that much. But I gave it a 3 stars. It was like meh. I didn't hate it. I don't hate the series now. I'm just disappointed that it fell into that category of manga that I get bored with. Then I read Brij of Clay by Marcus Zusak, which was a gift from my boyfriend for Valentine's Day. I love his writing style, and unpopular opinion, I gave this book 5 stars. So a lot of people don't like this book for various reasons. A lot of people don't like the writing style. A lot of people don't like the perspective that it's written in. A lot of people don't get it. I'm not gonna say that I get it or like I know what he was writing about, but I follow. I thought it was a really good look at a family, a dysfunctional family that is not uncommon, that is a pack of 5 brothers that are responsible for taking care of each other and loving each other in the way that brothers, that unique love that brothers share. I have a younger brother. I've always thought of us as brother and not sister and brother, because in this book, the family has gone through some shit. They've seen some shit, and it makes the siblings even more reliant on each other and even closer, a bond that siblings usually don't share. And it was something that I could totally relate to, because me and my brother have a bond that usually siblings don't share. We had to rely on each other a lot during my parents' divorce, and I was almost like a mom to him. So I can relate totally to the brother that is writing the story and how he turns into like a dad, but you still share that brotherly love. And I loved how they were just like a rambunctious pack of boys that did whatever they wanted and had so much imagination and so much heart. And their relationships and their family history and their mending, and I loved it. And what I would recommend to people, if you don't know if you're gonna like this or not, but you like Marcus Zusak's writing, but you're not sure if you're gonna be, if you don't know which side you're gonna fall on, I would totally recommend listening to the audiobook while reading the physical book, because Marcus Zusak is Australian and the book takes place in Australia, and there's a lot of like dialect and lingo that makes, for whatever reason, makes so much sense in the context of his accent and his cadence, and I could follow along perfectly. I don't know. I loved it. I thought it was perfect. So if you've read that book and you have a different opinion or the same opinion as me and you want to talk about that, I'm totally open to have a conversation about that, because I like discussing why people liked it or why people didn't like it. And yeah, if you want to talk about any of the books that I mentioned today, spoiler or not, just comment down below. I'm ready. Like, I love talking about books with people. That would be super cool for it to not just be like a one-sided conversation, you know? If you guys were to like have anything to say it, even if it doesn't agree with me. And then the last book I finished in February is another middle grade, Keeper of the Lost Cities by Shannon Messenger. And this is about a protagonist's name is Sophie, but she hears people's thoughts. She's a telepath. And this basically follows her as a 12-year-old, and she finds out why she's a telepath. She finds out what it means. She finds out a lot about her past and who she is. And the reason I gave this book 5 stars, because I gave this book 5 stars, and the reason being, I feel like every person in this age group needs to read, because it talks about things like, she's 12. It talks about finding your identity. It talks about grief. It talks about bravery. It talks about integrity. Like, it's just so good. It covers so many things that kids this age are going to be dealing with, and like, why not put it into a greatly written book for these kids to pick up on and like have a character they can relate to. So, and like, when I compare this one to the Percy Jackson series, there's just such a stark difference. In the Percy Jackson series it's really good. It's very fun and entertaining, but Percy Jackson doesn't deal with grief. He doesn't deal with really anything but courage and going on quests and having a crush on a girl that is your friend and not knowing what to do about it. But he doesn't ever, there's not as dramatic as a character arc of in that than this. Like, sure, we see him acting as a kid that is relatable, but you don't see him deal with the problems or deal with his emotions. Sophie deals with identity like Percy Jackson, but she also deals with grief. She also deals with what it means to have a family that you choose, relationships with all kinds of people, not just romantic. It was so profound for a middle grade book, and I can't wait to keep reading in the series because I love Sophie. I love her group of friends. I love the world that they live in. It's just enough world building for you to feel like you're in the story, but it's middle grade, so it doesn't go too far into the world building that you get lost or overwhelmed. And this has put me in such a reading slump because it was so good and I read through it so fast and I didn't want to pick anything else up, that everything else, I was just so impressed. Everything else I've been picking up, I haven't been loving. Like, I keep comparing the reading experience to this one. So yeah, this was the last book that I read in February. So a total of like 17 books, but like 6 of them were graphic novels, or 8 of them were graphic novels, so 4 or 5 novels, which I'd say is that's normal for me. So those are all the books that I've read in February. Hopefully I can get through a bunch in March too. That would be super cool. But anyways, yeah, thanks for sticking with me for this super long video. They're not going to be very long in the future. I usually don't read that many books. I usually don't get through that many. But anyways, thanks guys. See you in my next one. Bye.